How's everybody doing today? We're good? Good deal. My name's Cody. I'm going to let everybody go through a quick intro. Before we do that, we are talking about discovery today. I'm excited to dive into this because we have three very different business models here. We have Bonafide, that's e-commerce completely online, 100%. We have Goodwill, that's a resale type of marketplace that we're familiar with. And then we have Windsor that has hundreds of stores in the U.S. So you're going to get to see discovery through the lens of three completely different businesses today.
I'm Nargiza. I'm director of Ecommerce at Bonafide Health, and Bonafide is a women's health company. It's Nargiza. Bonafide is a women's health company, and we focused on developing scientifically validated, hormone-free, and drug-free supplements for women during menopause and perimenopause.
I'm Suzanne. I'm the Director of E-commerce for Goodwill here in South Florida, and we're a nonprofit focused on creating job opportunities and training for people with barriers to work. We operate mostly based on receiving donations, reselling them, and then using those funds to drive our mission.
And I'm Freya. I'm Senior Director of E-commerce at Windsor Fashions. Windsor Fashions is a young women's trend fashion brand, and we have 350 stores across the U.S. and Canada, and this year we're celebrating 89 years of dressing young women.
So when we talk about discovery, let's talk about where this is happening most often, and then let's maybe touch on how that's shifted in the last year.
Well, for Bonafide, discovery still happens in the usual places. Paid media and paid social, paid search are the main drivers of traffic for the website. But what happens, a lot of things changing between that first touch and the purchase. The research becomes more fragmented because customers are running from, they land on landing page, they go then check information on Amazon or Reddit, or they read AI summaries. So that's what we're seeing. And also last year we became omni-channel, so we launched retail, we launched at Target last September, and that has changed things a lot for us. So now it's not that it happens only on the website. She comes, she discovers us, but she may purchase whenever it's easier for her. Usually it's Amazon or Target, and that's why this year we're really prioritizing two things. We are building mental availability through upper funnel tactics. So we build brand awareness, so whenever she thinks Bonafide, she connects it to menopause. And then we're also building physical availability, and that's really meaning being whenever she shops and and it's easier for her.
For us, discovery happens across two parallel paths. So one is physical, it's in store, and that's usually when someone comes in to drop off a donation or to shop in person. And then the second, which is digital, mostly happens through third-party marketplaces. And so when someone is shopping online, they're not searching for Goodwill as a brand, they're just searching for a product that they need. And that's the biggest shift that we've noticed, is this focus on product-led discovery, where they're coming across a product page based on a search that they ran, and then from there they realize this is being sold by Goodwill, and that's how they're discovering us as an online seller.
Yeah, for Windsor, we obviously have a big network of stores, so discovery happens online and offline, and is generally triggered offline through a trip to the mall. And we primarily focus on milestone moments, so prom, homecoming, graduation, or wedding guest dresses. So there's a need-based discovery when she's looking for these types of dresses or these types of clothing. Online, we're really focused on TikTok shop, so we see a lot of discovery of the Windsor brand through TikTok, a lot of first-time customers that we're trying to capture on our Windsor store site once she's purchased on TikTok through bounce-back offers in our shipment inserts. So we have an offer in there for her to shop on our store instead of TikTok and get that retention. And then offline, we're really focused on events and building up our influencer program, our ambassadorship, and our affiliate program, and really showing up where she is and showing up to those events and inviting her to those events. So showing up at festivals, showing up on campus and partnering with sororities, and really being part of that zeitgeist and making sure that she sees the product out in the wild.
Love that. So we got a little bit of a lay of the land for each of you. I'm curious, what assumptions about discovery for each one of your brands have been proven wrong recently? I think that a lot of folks here would probably see a Windsor or a Bonafide or Goodwill or whomever and think, they've kind of got this dialed, right? You guys just walk through all the channels in which ways people can discover your brands. But when you kind of set these channels up for discovery, what went wrong or what changed?
Well, for Goodwill, one assumption that didn't hold for us was that brand awareness would lead to online shopping. Because our brand is very well known, but it's known in a specific way as a place where you donate or you thrift in person. And that familiarity doesn't necessarily translate over to the e-commerce behavior that we're looking to see. And so what we've had to do is really lean into our product pages, making sure we're showing up in search results right when the shopper is actually looking to make a purchase. And then that's the gateway into them discovering us as a brand and all of the other products that we sell online.
For Windsor, we've been very milestone moment focused. So again, speaking to prom, graduation, and all of those key moments and big moments in her life. But we really realized that speaking to these moments and trying to get acquisition for these moments is really tricky and really doesn't focus on retention. We were spending a lot of time scratching our heads and trying to understand her life cycle and saying, if we speak to her during prom, how do we figure out when it's her birthday so we can target her on her birthday? Or maybe she has a friend who's having a wedding and then we need to speak to her then for a wedding guest dress, which really wasn't working. So we had to take a step back and say, okay, what is our strategy and where do our strengths lie in our product and our assortment, and how does our customer actually see us? So what we realized is that our customer sees us as having her back in the big moments and in the small. So we took a step back and said, okay, how can we cater to those small moments in life? So we completely pivoted our strategy and said, okay, how do we go from a milestone-based brand to an everyday fashion brand? And that meant having a focus on retention, focusing and shifting our promotions to promoting our separates business and our everyday fashion, and really just driving events where those trend pieces and everyday fashion would take place. So we completely did a 180, and now we're in a mindset where when the customer comes to Windsor, she needs to be excited, and we need to show her something different at every digital touch point.
I just want to add one more point about, so we are D2C first brand. So our assumption was if we win click, we win purchase. But as we expand into omni-channel, this doesn't happen. And the funnel is not as linear as it used to be. So right now, even if she learns about us still on the same channel, like paid social, and she gets on the product page or landing page, she bounces back to Amazon or Target, like whenever it may be, so where like she feels more confident to buy. And for us, or for D2C, it's really important to not only optimize for website conversion, but also optimize for channel outcome. So that means tighter content across all of those channels, same claims, pricing. There are like so many elements that were like very disjointed when we just started this journey, and now we're trying to tighten this up. And also looking, I think like it also a shift in mindset that is happening, where now it's not only D2C, and like now all of our metrics should not be only focused on D2C and CACs, but it actually should expand. And we are looking at this customer leakage not as like we actually create a metric for that. So like we understand like what is happening after this customer leaves the website, but we still capture the purchase.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, it's very interesting to hear that we've added metrics like leakage, and then we took all of our milestones and metrics from Windsor and just basically went the other direction. These are all incredibly heavy lifts for a business, right? To understand, now we have this leakage metric that wasn't here yesterday or last year, and what does this impact, or what impact does this look like for us in 2026 and beyond, right? It's hard to plan when you haven't had to plan for it in the past. So you're essentially kind of starting this whole new vertical internally as well, which kind of leads me to my next question. Where do we see the biggest drop off with discovery or within discovery right now? I think Freya and Nargiza, you guys talked a lot about PDP to cart, but I'm interested for you guys to kind of maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. For us, the biggest drop-off happens on mobile product page because the majority of traffic gets to the website through mobile. About 70 to 80% gets through mobile. But the supplements product pages is usually very content heavy. There is a lot of information that you need to add. How to use it, why to use it, the science behind it. We are non-hormonal, there are testimonials. So there's a lot of information that can get overwhelmed. And if you don't resurface on time the key information about the product, like why to buy it, and also the buy box, then you will lose this customer. So we do a lot on optimizing that piece. And there are like a certain tests that really help us with that, which, moving buy box, creating CTA, like testimonials. There are a lot of things that we can do like to optimize that flow on mobile and even make this page less, like condense the page so you don't see all the information at once and it just appears as it needs to be. So those are our things.
Yeah, and for Windsor, as Cody mentioned, we see the biggest drop-off from PDP to add to cart. So there were a couple of myths we had to really debunk on our PDP. One was that it was mainly focused or needed to be mainly focused on information and having it be an informational stop within the customer journey. When we started A/B testing things like adding UGC content to our PDP, adding video content, really bringing that storytelling from homepage or other digital touch points before she even gets to our homepage through to that PDP, we saw a huge lift in conversion. So really making our PDP more inspirational and part of the storytelling versus an informational touch point in her journey. Another thing that has really helped us in terms of conversion is social proof. So high school is hard. We're not trying to make it harder. We want her to feel like she's part of a community and like she's on trend. So when we added social proof to our PDP, basically saying like this many people have viewed this item in the last hour, this many people have purchased this item in the last week, we're telling her that she's buying into the latest trend and she's joining that community of trendsetters.
And in Goodwill, so just for contrast, since we primarily operate through a marketplace model, when shoppers land on our product page, as opposed to what Nargiza and Fry are sharing, it's not just about capturing their attention, and if you don't capture it in that moment, they leave your website. In our case, they land on our product page. They're doing a side-by-side comparison of similar items from competing sellers in real time. And so what we really focus on is a lot of the core fundamentals of how do you give trust signals and relevance, and a lot of the fundamentals about a strong product page, especially when you're dealing with secondhand markets, that is a little bit of a different twist than what you tend to see just from a direct-to-consumer model.
Sure, and all those answers are great. I think, this is probably the question that no one in this room saw coming. I think we got to talk about AI in discovery. So how are you using specifically for discovery, how are you using AI to improve discovery? And then have we found any kind of limit within AI today for discovery purposes?
Well, at Goodwill, we use AI heavily. We operate at a very large scale and with a lean team. So we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of unique SKUs with a very limited team. And without automation, our business model wouldn't even be viable. And the way that we're using AI is really around content and search readiness. And so we have software that, based on a picture, it will pull key product data. So things like the brand of the item, the materials used, the color or size, and then turn that into listing data that drives discovery across marketplaces. Where we've seen it fall short is anything around judgment and nuance. So something like pricing decisions, perceived value, or understanding the condition of a product, that's where we need humans to make the judgment. And so the way we see it is AI handles scale. It's great at pattern recognition, but then we still need humans to make the judgment call.
So our team uses AI in ways that are probably very similar to other businesses in this room. We use it for search and merch personalization, personalizing the customer journeys across the page, depending on where you're coming from and where you should be landing. We also use it across PDP copy generation and soon for virtual try-on as well. But what doesn't really work for us yet, and I think it's just because of the stage where AI is at, is for PDP image generation and video generation. So we're obviously selling an emotion, we're selling a feeling when we're selling our clothing and our dresses, and AI just hasn't been able to capture that emotion that a human would behind the camera. Another area where we're struggling to integrate AI, where I would love to use AI, is for translation in our international pages and our international sites. So this might be, an issue with tooling versus AI, but we're not able to capture those third-party vendors that we have integrated on our international pages and having them translated on top of what's sitting in Shopify. So if anyone has any recommendations, I would love to hear them.
For us, for Bonafide, we thinking a lot how we are showing up in LLMs when the users ask questions related not brand but related to symptom. For health, it's a little bit challenging because LLMs are defaulted to recommend natural ingredients versus branded products. So we really pay a lot of attention on the, the FAQ schema, how we, making sure that content is searchable, is readable, working on ingredients glossary, so it's showing up when, LLMs recommend those ingredients. And also things like clinical studies, because we have a lot of science behind our products, and that's create the evidence and trust for LLMs. So it's really important not only use AI for internal needs that we do a lot, but also how we are showing up when customers asking regular questions. So we do AI audits constantly. And for us, yes, we use I think AI really unlocked for us a lot of from personalization and A/B testing, because before it was very resource heavy, was you needed the code, you needed development. Now those things and those experiments we can launch in minutes with little to no code, and that's really was a big unlock for us. And in addition to that, right, we also use AI a lot in the voice of customer, where we check the sentiment, the feedback, and really that information and those insights then fuel our roadmap for product team, for digital product team. So, that's a really good use case. And when it comes to limitations, I think similar to you, it really need human to drive that, especially in health. You cannot say certain things, you cannot do certain claims, then you're gonna be, sued for that. So every content that we have, every piece of content that we have on the website, it's still legally approved, it's still like human controlled. And also with AI chatbots, what we realized that although it's super helpful and users love to, chat with the bot, it's still, there are certain questions where like still prefer human touch, especially when those questions are more, heavy, like around health. So we still have our human agents overseeing the chatbots.
Yeah, it feels good for whatever reason to hear someone touch on the fact that we understand that you, the consumer, still wants to talk to a human being instead of the chatbot. That's my biggest frustration as a buyer, right? Is go to the chatbot, it's got 4 questions it can answer and not even close to what I need to talk to them about. So I hope that everyone else can kind of resonate with that, because that was validating for me, I think. Freya, you and I were talking about this before, right? So where I come in with all this in my company, we're the delivery, we're the operations, we're the tech forward 3PL. This is all incredibly fascinating to me, because while we play very closely together in the same sandbox, it's very, very different. So hearing, we're talking for 20 plus minutes about discovery, and that's just one leg to this. I'm curious how you guys keep your teams aligned internally on discovery priority while still moving fast, because it's not like Windsor or Goodwill or Bonafide can say, hey, we're going to take a break for a week and figure this out before we get back to doing what we do. So how do you guys keep cross-functional alignment alive while still scaling a business?
Yeah, so we go live with 200 SKUs a week, and at any point in time, we're managing upwards of 7,000 SKUs on our site. So We have a lot of SKUs, a lot of product, which means a lot of business critical tickets coming in and a lot of issues on our site on a daily basis. So we basically have kind of two funnels and ways of working to make sure that we can still be agile, but that we're getting things done and not kind of working in circles. So we have a very detailed and strategic product roadmap where we're less flexible, and we check in on a monthly basis to make sure that our product roadmap still serves our business purposes and it still serves the objectives that we're trying to achieve. Then on the other hand, we have weekly touch points for business critical tickets to make sure that we're getting through that backlog and making sure that our site is working as it should. That's on the tech side. On a design side, we have to be extremely flexible because we are working in a trend environment. So our team basically has to be flexible in changing our content, changing our storytelling, changing our products, while still maintaining that long-term roadmap from a tech perspective. And I think what's really helped us and has allowed us to try out new things while still staying on track is twofold. So one is that we really don't compare ourselves to our competitors. We take inspiration, of course, but we don't compare, because once you get into a funnel of comparing yourself, you lose track of your own objectives and of your own roadmap. So we take inspiration and we adapt, and we do that through our Windsor mobile app. So we launched our app about a year and a half ago, and our app has really allowed us to try out new things. We can be much quicker through our app. We have our most loyal customer on our app, so we get instant feedback through our app. And whatever works on our app and whatever we're testing and integrating there, if it works, we scale it to our Windsor site. So that's how we're able to, stay flexible but move quickly.
Nailed it. No kidding. She absolutely nailed it. Yeah, that was a tough one to follow. So let's go to something that you and I talked about, which was essentially, how are you identifying the moment in which a shopper shifts from discovery to decision, right? Because you guys have all touched on that a lot today. Is, there's discovery, but then there's also like the education, there's the leakage, and all these things start to run together. But when are we seeing decision, or is this just discovery?
So when we look at our customers, we really look at the intent. And an intent could be measured by a number of pages that she has viewed or the channel she came from. Usually email or branded search has a higher intent versus prospecting on paid. And then what type of customer she is. Is it a new customer? Is it returning? Is that a subscriber? And based on that, we serve different content. So for low and medium content, it would be around who we are, what the product is, like what problem it solves, and we really lean into guided education. So things like quizzes help a lot because it's educating customer without overwhelming them and giving a lot of information, but in a fun form. And for the high intent customers, like that's where the decision is made. That's where we lead with clarity and trust and risk reducers. So things like, doctor proofs and testimonials and free shipping, guarantees and money back guarantees. So a lot of things were like, okay, like that's the right product for you, and and also explain like why you should buy here, because like at this moment that's where we are, we are seeing now that that's in the decision mode, that's where we are losing customer. So it's really, really important for that website experience to answer the question why buy here. And it's not only with competitive offer, but it's also those additional perks that you add to that, the trust, the the shipping, the gift with purchase. So there are like different metrics and like different taxes that we use, but ultimately it's really leading with the clarity and just making sure that it's super, super easy for her to buy and make decision on the spot before she leaves the site.
In our case, we don't always have visibility or control over that shift. And so for sake of contrast, similar to what Nargiza was describing, in your traditional DTC models, that shift is quite explicit and it can trigger a very different experience, whether it's the quizzes or pop-up messaging highlighting urgency, it could be emails or retargeting ads. In our case, because we're operating through marketplaces for the most part, we don't have control over the post-discovery experience, so we're focused on front-loading everything. everything related to trust signals and relevance. And so that's focusing on things like clear product imagery that are going to answer questions that customers have about the product without them having to engage with us. Or it could be about getting strong seller ratings or setting clear expectations of what they can expect to receive from us. And so for us, we're focused less on intervening after the fact and more about focusing on upfront hygiene, I would say, so that we're not losing them to the next item or product page, because when that happens, we don't always get a second chance to win them back.
You can skip me. I think you guys covered it all.
I would say so too. Okay, so let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what we would think that brands in the crowd right now are underestimating in terms of discovery today. And then let's think about advice that you would give, kind of obviously being the experts in this subject, for over the next 12 to 18 months. Because like we just talked about, there's just a lot of moving pieces going on right now. We've got leakage, we've got TikTok doing whatever they're doing, right? There's just like every day it seems like there's a new challenge, tariffs last year. So what would you guys give advice on for the next year? And then let's talk about what we're maybe underestimating today.
Well, or do you want to go? I would say brands are putting a lot of attention and energy over what gets attention and driving people to their website, but they're underinvesting on what actually converts that attention once someone lands on their page. And there's this emphasis or this change, this shift, where discovery is increasingly happening at the product level. And that could be because the product page is showing up because of whether it's a marketplace or it's a shopping ad, or it could be AI-driven search results. That can very much be the first real interaction someone is having with your brand. And so I think brands need to start rethinking of the product page as a gateway for someone to further explore your brand and understand what other products you offer to them.
You touched on attention and engagement, and that's something that we're really focused on for the next 12 months. Obviously, attention is sparse these days, and it's hard to keep someone engaged on whatever digital platform they're on. So we're really focused on trying to increase our engagement time, both on our site and on our mobile app. So doing things like gamifying retention and loyalty, adding things like virtual try-on or interactive styling advice in our app and on our site. So anything that basically treats our platform as something like a social media where she's going to spend a lot of time, she's going to scroll through aspirational images, influencer content, anything that keeps her there longer. So that's one thing we're really focused on. Another thing is obviously agentic commerce. So as we try to figure it out alongside everyone else, we're optimizing our PDPs, we're optimizing our site to really show up and be visible in LLMs. But I think a really interesting exercise we participated in for the last couple months was actually asking ChatGPT, how does ChatGPT see our brand? So how does it perceive Windsor? And the answers that it provided us were very different from how we actually see Windsor as a brand. So we've kind of gone back and forth and took ChatGPT's answers, iterated and improved on our site in terms of where Windsor thought we were lacking and where we thought we were doing well, iterated, and finally got to a point where where ChatGPT sees Windsor as the brand we want it to be. So that's kind of getting us to the right track in terms of showing up where we want to show up in these LLMs. So I would highly recommend trying that out and also doing it for your competitors as well to see what ChatGPT thinks of your competitors. And if they're doing something right, check out how they're doing it and take inspiration from that.
Yes, that's 100% what I would do too, and that's exactly what we're doing. But just to add to what you said, Raya, is don't only check on ChatGPT, but also check on other LLMs, because it's interesting that the results can be very different. Let's say if you check for symptom-based questions on Gemini, then Bonafide will show up in the product recommendations, but it won't show up almost like zero at ChatGPT. So do AI audit across different LLMs and then optimize your content and your website to make sure that you are showing up in that answer layer, because that's what is important. Because I think in the next 12 to 18 months, what I would say, like, don't compete for the click, compete to be the answer. Because ultimately, I think what's happening, that clicks are going away. Customers, like, people now click less, because there was a research that when Google shows up an AI summary, people actually click less on traditional results, like 8% versus 15% without the AI summary. So that's a very big shift, and that's what we should be optimized for. That now you need to be the answer. Now you need, and that's what Bonafide is working right now. Build this mental availability and also physical availability. So when she hears Bonafide, like, when she hits, like, she start having a symptom, she, like, the first thing that she thinks is Bonafide, because, like, that's what she's connected in her head with menopause and symptoms around that phase in the women's life, and then also be available for her whenever she wants to shop. And for us, it's not only website, Amazon, Target, we're gonna be on CVS, so, like, expand into as many channels as possible. So I think, like, that's what we focusing on. And for the brands, I would say yes, like, do the AI audit, as you said, like, PDP discovery is really important. Optimize the content, and that's it. There was, like, something else, but I forgot.
There was enough for me. I know that for sure. My head is spinning. That was great. Thank you all so much for working with me on this. It's been so much fun. Thank you all for your time and attention here. And I think we're right on time, too.